So let's move on to your next book.
Yeah,
So the space race.
the space race.
I honestly thought that the kids were going to end up in space.
They were originally in very early drafts. They were going to end up in space. And actually, when I was plotting the story originally, I thought, right, how can I get them into space? Um, and I remember Leah and I sitting there, and Leah just said, "This isn't going to work because how are we going to explain the sudden arrival of three children in a spacecraft out of the blue?" You know, when we've when we've put the kids in these situations in the past three books, there's always been a reason that they might be there. And children don't stand out. You know, children are everywhere, apart from on a spacecraft with a very highly selected, highly intelligent, specifically selected crew. So we had to crush that idea quite quickly. And that was a bit of a shame. So we did had to do a bit of a pivot, but it was definitely the right choice because it would have thrown up some enormous logistical problems for us when it came to writing it.
I mean, this one is, I would say, arguably more dangerous than the other books, is what I would say. I was just like, oh my God, this is like turning into like Con Air or something like that, like, oh my
Yeah,
God, like,
there were definitely higher stakes in this one, definitely.
definitely
But I
high
do think
stakes.
that when you've got, I don't think this is too much of a spoiler because it does happen as soon as the kids get into the past. But when you've got a rocket, I mean, I just had to blow it up, right? I couldn't, like, you have to blow the rockets up. We had to blow the rockets up. Like, it just, you know, it's fun. Nobody was hurt in the blowing up of the rockets.
But you are right in saying that rockets do blow up. I mean,
Rockets
there
do
have
blow up.
been multiple rockets that have blown up, whether we hear about it or not. But the one in your book, is that actually based on any real rocket that had blown up, or do you just put there in there for creative?
Good question. So not specifically a specific rocket, but it was kind of based on there were a collection of rockets. Oh, I think were they called Redstone or something like that? I can't remember exactly what they were called. And actually, if you watch the Hidden Figures film, they talk about them quite a lot. Um, and in the process of getting into space, when the maths wasn't right, when the science wasn't right, the rockets blew up quite a lot. And this was the problem that the USA were having because they desperately needed to get a rocket into orbit. They wanted to get a rocket up into space before the USSR did, but they were running into problems time and time again where that rocket was getting to a certain point and then it was blowing up. Um, Now, a lot of the time, though, the reasons those rockets blew up were because of maths far beyond my understanding. You know, you had incredible mathematicians and scientists and engineers working at the NACA trying to make this a reality. Um, I had to kind of simplify things. Luckily, I have a friend from school who he did. Mm, he's going to be really cross with me if I get this wrong, but I can't remember something like aeronautical engineering at university, something to do with putting things in the air. And essentially, when I was trying to figure out the maths of this, because shocker, Leah also does not have much hands-on experience with the maths of rockets. Um, he basically had to just teach me a very like rocket science for dummies over WhatsApp, and then I had to just try and he tried to simplify that down, and I would send texts that were a bit like, "Would my rocket explode if?" And then I'd put a scenario forward, and then he'd have to say, "Yeah, but also no." And he was brilliant. I wouldn't have. I think the book would have been much harder to write if he hadn't been there as my person that I could just ask random questions about rocket science to. So that was incredibly useful.
Again, to be honest with you, the fact that you took, this is what I mean by the attention to detail, the fact that you took the time to even consider that and think, actually, I want to be as accurate as possible when it comes to these sorts of things. You could have just said that, yeah, the rocket blew up, yeah, whatever. You could have been really, really just meh about it. But no, you put in the effort to be like, no, I'm going to make sure that I'm meticulous and accurate about this and make sure that it's correct. And you did that.
Well, as correct as it could be.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I just think personally, it makes the story so much richer if you have those kind of little textural details in there. Um, you want it to feel like it has real depth to it, like this actually could have happened. Um, and if you don't put in the work, you run the risk of it, the sort of the whole thing feeling a bit shallow, which we never wanted it to feel. We really wanted readers to feel like, these kids are in this situation. This is a plausible thing that could happen. So yeah, it's worth it, I think.
I think so too. I think a lot of people would appreciate those facts, and the fact that you put lots of real facts like at the back of the book too. I love that. Considering I'm a complete and utter history geek and science geek, I really appreciate that. To be honest with you, I look forward to the back of the book
Yes, we love.
to
I love
read
doing the back of the book because the thing is, right, when we write the story, it's just that it's fictional. None of the things that we put in the stories have actually happened. They're all okay. There are things that in the background, they are historical things that have gone on, but really the stuff that happens with the characters, that's all a product of mine and Leah's imagination. But it's heavily inspired by real women, real events, and we just want to make sure that those inspirations get the credit that they're due, because that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise the profile of these women and highlight the amazing things they've done. And sometimes, you know, you have to also shed a little bit of light then on the history that surrounds it. I mean, the space race is, when you think about it, it's crazy that there were these two massive nations who were literally at war with each other to get into space, and the things they were achieving. And when you look at that timeline, you know, and it's also really, really interesting. We didn't want to shy away from the fact, I don't know whether you picked this up or not, that actually the USA were quite far behind in sending a woman into space. Whereas the USSR, it wasn't very long after they'd sent their first cosmonaut up that we then had a female cosmonaut. It was 20 years later for the USA. That wasn't really something we had a chance to reflect on within the parameters of the story. So putting that timeline out, setting that timeline out so you could see it actually happening, that was important for us too. Yes, this story was set in the USA, but actually the achievements of female USSR cosmonauts was just as massive.
completely agree with that. And I think that's where we come to the limitations of what society feels that women are able to do. And I think although you feel like as if, you weren't able to touch upon that within the book as much, I feel like as if there was a very strong theme of that actually, because you're a woman or there are various intersectionalities, those intersectionalities actually prevent you from doing certain things just because of the way that you are perceived in society. And there are a few words, a few sentences, I should say, that I wrote down that really reflect this. Um, yeah, so there, where is it? Here it is. So this was a sentence that really stuck out at me, and he said, "It's ridiculous to stop someone doing something just because of the color of their skin." And I was just like, working in an EDI space, nobody has actually worded it as purely as that sentence. That sentence is exactly what we're fighting, right? Is exactly what we're fighting. It's ridiculous to stop someone doing something just because of the color of their skin. It's so real and raw. We often, when we talk, we tend to try to like make it very like flamboyant and use big words and everything like that. That is the essence.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's what it is.
And I just thought, wow, like to that I welled up because I was just like, nobody's put it as simple and as beautiful as that. That is exactly it.
Well, I'm pleased that it hit that chord because that's what we intended it to do. That is, that is fundamentally, there's not much more I can say about it because that is the objective truth.
How did you pick the space race though? Like, how did you pick that out? Did you watch the Hidden Figures and were like, huh, it'd be good to base something along that? Or like, where did that come from?
So actually, interestingly, we didn't. We started with um, we knew we wanted to explore somebody in STEM, um, and uh, there was a lot of discussion, and we just felt that although the Hidden Figures film was there, it's an adult film, and how much uh, our children, the children, you know, learning about that in schools. I mean, when I was teaching year six, we didn't touch on it. So I don't know if it's something that's come into primary schools. I know that when you go, well, certainly when I was at school and I went into secondary school, your history resets and you end up going sort of right back to 1066. So, are we acknowledging the events um, that led up to the USA and the USSR getting into space adequately? I think I studied sort of like the Cold War, the space race era when I was in my second year of GCSEs. So by that point, I was 16 years old, um, and I still knew nothing about these women. And if that's still happening today, then actually something we decided that this would be a pretty good way of remedying that. Now, I can't sit here and say that's definitely these kids have no idea who they are because there's a strong chance that they maybe do. But we felt that there was a lot that we could explore, and we also felt that there was, this is quite important, there was room there for us to create a really fun story around it, whilst also bringing that awareness. There was a lot of scope for us to give these main characters a real adventure. Um, so it felt good to land there really.
I did find it a bit weird. Like, I was like, everybody's running around. There's these three kids in a corridor. Nobody's paying attention to them. In my head, I was thinking, I was thinking, how are they gonna justify having three kids in a corridor? I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting what they come up with. And you come up with Space Camp, and I was just like, huh. Interesting space camp. And then there were it's like as if like you really tried you tried to make sure that actually they never saw
They
the
never went
space.
near the space camp, and actually they did their very best to stay as far away from that space camp as they possibly could. I think Mimi's attitude was a bit like, okay, look, the Watchers brought us here and it's given us a good excuse, let's not push our luck. um there's only so far we can get creative with the truth. Yeah.
I love it. I think it's brilliant. But let's go back to the beginning of the book because this was the part of the book when I was just like, Jordan, Leah, how could you do this to your readers? It's just mean. It's plain mean. You gave book Leah a knee injury.
We did.
And I literally went, "Oh my God, I can't believe you've done this." As traumatic as it was for Leah and how she's come out of it, hats off to her. She's just come back stronger for her fans. It
Yes.
was also like a big like we are like no, and then to put it back was almost like reliving it again. I mean, Leah said in interviews and stuff like that. I mean, she doesn't really like talking about it too much either. So, what made you want to put that knee injury into the book, and why was it important that it was in there?
Well, they do say, don't they, that you should write what you know, draw on your own experiences, and that's very true in this instance. But I think actually the decision to include an injury was less to do with Leah's own injury in real life and more to do with what we were trying to, the theme we were trying to explore, which really was about patience. And I'm sure that she won't mind me sharing this, but I remember when Leah first got injured, having a conversation with her and her saying, "Look, it's happened. There's nothing I can do about it. The only thing I can do, the only thing I can control going forward is how I deal with my recovery. And yeah, I can get angry and I can not do my exercises correctly in an effort to rush my return, but that's just going to see me with another injury. If I'm going to do this properly, I need to be patient. I need to do what doctors are telling me. I need to do this right." And I think that's a lesson that we all need to learn at some point. And for book Leah, this is the point at which she has to learn it. Okay, her knee injury is far less severe than what Leah experienced last year, but she has that decision to make, doesn't she? Yes, she can not put 100% into her rehab exercises. She can not listen to the doctor. She can try and rush it and get back onto the pitch as soon as possible. But what's actually ultimately probably going to happen if she does that is that she's going to end up injured again and let herself down and her team down, and find herself more frustrated than she was at the beginning. And that concept of patience is something that we then explore throughout the book. When the kids go back to the USA, to the 1950s, and there are certain characters who are, without giving spoilers, dealing with a lack of patience, shall we say. We look at how it impacts them and it impacts what they're trying to achieve. And I think that book Leah really learns from that, and sees what can happen when you do try and rush something. It's that old, it just basically goes back to that old hare and the tortoise story. Slow and steady wins the race. If you're going to rush something, there's a chance it's not going to be done properly, or at least it's not going to be done to the best of your abilities. And that's the case here. And the injury was a useful way for us to explore that.
Mm.
Also, as well, on a more practical level, there is a risk of injury in football. If you play football, there is a chance you're going to get injured. My brother plays football and he's had more injuries in the last year than I've ever known him to have. It's part and parcel of the game. And if there are kids who are reading this and adults who are reading this who like to play football, they will be able to empathize with that. They will probably have had their own injuries. One of the really lovely things when we do the signings is that we get lots of players who come up to us and they say, I did my ACL or I was injured, and actually watching you, Leah, come through that and do it all properly has forced me to think about how I'm dealing with my own situation. And that's really lovely because now they can also read this book. I mean, not lovely that they're injured. Hope they all get better soon, but lovely because they can read this book. And again, it's about seeing their own experiences on the page, and really knowing what that character's going through and knowing that frustration, feeling that frustration along with them.
I definitely think that the things that the book talks about and the things that Leah says, whether it's in interviews or whether fans have had personal interactions, there's this underpinning theme of hope, right? It is, and I think it's something that a lot of people are looking for. And the great thing is that people can now find that in two places because you've combined those two things that they love so much or have gotten themselves into, which is women's football, or just football in general, and reading.
Yeah,
And I think that that's what comes out of this is just hope. It
that's
honestly
lovely.
it is.
That's really nice. That is really nice. I'm glad.
But it's true. Now, actually, to be honest with you, I was thinking about this today and I was thinking about I think I was just watching like a football clip or something like that. I was on TikTok and it brings something out of you. And I just thought, what is this feeling that I'm feeling that every time where I'm either watching an interview or watching a game of football, what is this feeling that I'm feeling? Uh, and it's freedom. It
That's
is
really lovely.
freedom. And I think sometimes like when you feel like there's so many things that you have to do in life, right? You have so many roles, responsibilities and everything like that. And then you're just like for 90 minutes, or if you just watch a clip or something like that, all of a sudden it feels like freedom. Something just
Just
feels a
shut
little
off,
bit,
can't you?
it just feels free. And I don't know, there's just a certain amount of joy, I suppose, that comes out of it that kind of carries you through to the next day. And yeah, do you know what? That is a lot of pressure to put on the players that you kind of look up to. Like, you are responsible.
For my eternal happiness.
It's so, it's so funny. Like,
But do you know what? In a way, yes, I understand what you're saying. It is a lot of pressure to put on those players. But in the wake of the Euros, we've got so much more investment into, that the grassroots of women's football, that we're going to be having some really promising players coming up through the ranks. And actually, that team is constantly going to be, whatever team you follow, is constantly be going to be refilling that jar of inspiration, because you're getting these new enthusiastic players coming through who can carry that, who can bring that level of, you know hope and freedom, as you say, to the sport. And I think that's so lovely to know that actually that funding that wasn't there is there now, and it's just going to make such a massive difference to the women's football teams of the future, of the years to come.
it is slowly happening, but we are seeing a bit of a so like a difference between like the lower ranked teams and the higher ranked teams, and we've seen like the revenue that they generate and things like that,
Mm.
and there is just this massive
Yeah,
difference. But we're also seeing obviously with the likes of Michelle Kang, for example, she's invested so much in the London City Lionesses. We're getting international players playing at championship level now, and
yeah,
hopefully that will help to level up the playing field a little bit as well. We've got the likes of Aslani and Van Agmond and all of those sorts of players now coming in. Hopefully, that will kind of bridge the gap a little bit.
yeah. There
But
is still definitely work to be done, 100%, definitely. um I'm just excited to see it get done, and then to see the difference it's made once it's been done.
I hope so too, and I think gradually the championship and the league, the FA and WL also are getting, it's funny. The championship actually doesn't have its own Instagram page, which is funny, whereas the Barclays WSL does. So WSL
Mm.
has their own Instagram page. They do a lot of promotion and everything like that. And so does the FA and WL, but the championship doesn't, which is quite unusual because that's kind of like the middle tier. But again, we digress. But
Yes, we do,
like always, Jordan, damn it.
like always.
I was actually going to say, in the first chapter of the book, and I've said this before, but the game that you write
Mhm.
feels like as if it's the first half of Arsenal season before we had Renee Slaggers. Good old Renee Slaggers, we love her.
You know what? That actually that's completely coincidental, not done on purpose. I can promise you.
Okay, that's good, but it really did feel like I was like, oh my God, I wonder if this was really what's going through their minds. And I do wonder though, when Arsenal haven't won, or you let a goal in or something like that, do you think that there's that element of uh I could have done better, or I could have done this, or I could have done that, that happens after the game, and how do you come out of that mindset to keep going? Because I know in my job, if I mess something up, it will hang over me for
Mm.
days, thinking, what could I have done better? What could I have done to prevent something from happening, or whatever it is?
Yeah, but it's difficult. It's
Yeah.
incredibly difficult to feel like it was something in your control you could have changed. And I can only imagine that on a less severe scale. The girls in those teams must experience that same thing. I mean, I mean, I can't speak from a footballing point of view. Um, and my situation is definitely not as drastic as a football match or as serious as the situation that you experienced. But when I was training to teach, we would have observations all the time. And the feedback was pretty relentless all the time, which is why I think I'm such a big fan of feedback now, because I can see just how useful it is. Um, but if you had a bad lesson and you got bad feedback, that didn't change the fact that the next day you'd have to get up and go and teach those kids again. You still had to do it. I know that personally, I used to kind of say to myself, all right, you can have an evening of wallowing if you need it. But when you wake up tomorrow, that's it. You've had your evening of wallowing, and now it's time to kind of put your big girl pants back on and go back and do your job. Because ultimately those failures do happen. They are a part of life. They happen. You can't avoid them as much as we would all like to avoid them. And also, interestingly, something that you see as a failure in yourself, others might not see it as a failure at all. And it all comes down to the self-esteem you have and how you perceive your role in an event. But I can imagine that there is no choice but to just pick yourself up, because I know from teaching that if I let that feedback or that bad teaching experience get to me, then I'm going to be a worse off teacher the next day. I don't teach anymore, but when I did, that was always my mentality of it. If I don't pick myself up, I'm just going to be continuing a pattern of not being very good. And I imagine that must be the same when you're playing football.
I think the
But I
difference
can
is,
appreciate how tempting it would be to just be really annoyed with yourself for like days.
I mean, I think the difference, like obviously, like we were doing in front of a classroom of kids, and footballers do it in stadiums full of thousands of people, and you
And
just
everyone has an opinion on them.
everybody has an opinion. And in my head, like I am. I'm a massive advocate for player care and kind of I want to protect these players so much. Like I can't even articulate it well enough to say how much. Like I just want to make sure that, mentally, physically that they're doing okay. Because when you are in front of thousands and thousands of people, like, and Millie Bright has put it on her Instagram stories only recently to say that, there was a fan wanting pictures and stuff like that from her, but in the same sentence also criticized her and said how crap she was in the first half and all this kind of stuff. Why, what that does to somebody's mentality and what it does to their mental health, like you really have to have mental resilience, but at the same time, they shouldn't be experiencing that kind of, I don't even, it's not feedback, it's not criticism, it's just being mean. It's
I think
unkind.
sometimes people forget that they are people,
Mm.
that they're real people. All they see is that they are um, a player in their football team. They only see the football player and they don't see the person. And I think because they play on such a public stage, people feel that they have an entitlement to them, to their lives, to comment on their performance without really truly registering the impact that's going to have on them as individuals. Yeah, it's a shame.
And I think that they have their own time to analyze the games after the match, and they will be aware of their own performances. They're the ones who are actually performing, right? So they are the number one people who are going to know
Yeah.
exactly what, whether they've done well or whether they haven't done well. they don't need people who don't play or wouldn't be able to play like them on a pitch anyway to be commenting like that. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah,
And it's
completely.
just, yeah, it's just not right. Right, going back to the books, we digressed again. Segregation,
Yes.
massive topic in your book, and no amount of hours would be able to do it justice of what we talk about. But it is a very strong theme in your book because actually this is one of the reasons, and it's a very real thing that happened. And when it came to NACA, that they were disregarding what these incredible mathematicians, who are black, who are women, were actually delivering, and they were top-notch scientists, top-notch mathematicians. And it's a very strong theme in here, about segregation, and in fact that the segregation still exists today.
Yeah, I mean, it was the really funny thing. It's not funny at all, but the really interesting thing about this is that they were more than happy to take the maths and the hard work that these women were doing and actually affording them none of the credit. Um, there were two computing groups of human computers, a white group and a black group, and they were sat at opposite ends of the campus. They didn't mix. And, you know, this is all happening within that microcosm of the NACA, but actually in wider America, that kind of separation existed everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Um, at the point where the characters arrive in America, we're just approaching that point where, the Montgomery bus boycott has happened a few years previously. Martin Luther King is very much drumming up support for the civil rights movement, and and has been, and the but the children are still very much experiencing an America that has been segregated for a long time. I mean, interestingly, when the NACA became NASA, so something I found out in my research, when they became NASA, they actually got rid of segregated bathrooms. Um, that was they got rid of that completely, and segregation sort of lessened quite a lot when that transition happened. But in that those the years of the 50s, it was still very much a reality, and the racism that existed in institutions and just everyday life was heavy, very heavy.
Okay, and something very interesting while you were speaking came to my mind as well because I'm so in fact in the book, if you look at it in amongst the kids, Leah is actually the only white one amongst her friends. However,
Yes,
it was never questioned in the book what why there wasn't a question in the book about there is no segregation here between Leah and her friends. Like
yes,
nobody was
yeah.
that intentional?
That was a conscious decision. Actually, when we were planning the book, we were a little bit like, how are we going to navigate this? Because by the rules of segregation, Mimi would have to use a different bathroom. Mimi would have to use a different cafeteria. The rules for Mimi would be completely different. Um, she would have to follow rules that Cindy had to follow, and the way that the children were treated would have been enormously different. Um, we didn't have, quite simply, the word count to address that, um, as fully as I would have wanted to do it. I wouldn't. We spoke about it a lot, and the sense was that we didn't want that to be a throwaway.
Hmm.
We'll just add that in and then never mention it again, um, kind of thing. Um, and if it would have also made it very sort of, at certain points, it would have made it difficult for the story to continue. Um, and in a way, um, within the book, we also didn't want distract too heavily from the amazing work that the women in that computing group were doing. And, you know, if the different ethnicities of the children had played too large a part, um, that would have unbalanced it a bit. And we wanted to make sure as a narrative that the impact these women were having, the work these women were having was front and center, despite the challenges. So, you know, it's really important for us that these kids are coming from the future back to the past, but the people who are living in that past are the focus. Does that make sense?
That makes
Um,
sense.
Not to minimize at all what, you know, had Mimi actually lived, and George to a certain extent, had they lived in the US at that time, they would have also experienced that. Not to minimize that at all, but really we didn't want the children distracting from those actual people that were actually there living that reality.
I would just like to say that actually, as a byproduct, whilst your track of thought was that, I think what the book actually shows is an example of how things should be. So
Yeah,
it it
I
very
like that. That's really nice.
it very discreetly shows that's this is, you know, they've gone to visit the past, that's how it was. They are the future.
Yeah,
And that's what a future looks like,
yeah,
right? I think very discreetly, that's what you've done without even realizing it, is showing that actually this is how it should be, that nobody does question it, that actually that they are setting the example for how it should be in reality. I think that's been a happy side effect, if you like.
yeah. Do you know what? I hadn't thought about it that way, but I really like that. It's lovely to think that the kids have come back to this society where people are told where they can sit and what they can do based on the color of their skin, and that's so alien to them, and they can be so outraged about that because it's not an experience they've had in the present day. um yeah, definitely.
And finally, I mean, there was a sentence in here that I wondered about. It says here, her mom always talked about doing things with intention. Um, so does your aunt really say that? Is that a kind of like a nod to what people in your family say, or?
um I mean, she might say that, but I actually put that in there because that's a particular belief of mine, uh,
Ah,
about just doing something with all of yourself. If you're going to do something, commit to it, do it. And actually, thinking about it, that is a sentiment actually that my family does believe in quite heavily. You know, if you're going to commit yourself to something and say, right, I'm going to do this, then you owe it to yourself and to everybody involved to go for it completely and to do it with intention, to really, really mean it. And I think as well in this situation, because I believe this when Leah is trying to get the magnifying glass to work.
yeah.
Yeah, she really needs this to work just then for her. And I think that what I wanted to convey was that you have to put a great deal of conviction behind something if you want to see success. And you need to really believe that that whatever you're going to do is it's going to work. It's going to work. Funnily enough, actually, this might even have seeped in subconsciously from my husband, but my husband always says when I ask him to do something, like this is very stereotypical, but if I can't open a jar and he's opening a jar, and if he's struggling, he'll then stop and say, I'm going to do it next time. And every single time after he said that, he does it. And it's almost like the conviction of being like, I'm going to do it next time, pushes him to actually do it. And that is something he learned from his dad, who also says that I'm going to do it next time. And then he does it. And it's this, I think that mentality is something that runs through both of our families quite heavily, is that kind of, if you're going to do it, put everything into it, put some conviction to it, really mean it.
You know what?
So
I'm
Yeah.
gonna try that. There's a bottle of kimchi I've been trying to open for ages. I'm
Well,
not gonna lie.
hopefully, I take no responsibility if it doesn't work. You can blame my husband.
Honestly, I've been trying to open this jar of kimchi for about 6 months,
Oh gosh.
and I haven't been able to open it still.
Oh well, next time you'll have to, I see you. You have to bring it along with you, and we can get Rob to open it. He'll be able to do it.
I'm not sure whether security at Meadow Park would allow me to bring in.
Why have you got this in it? Well, you see, the thing is, you never know.
I could sneak it in.
You could sneak it in.
I could sneak it. To be fair, a lot of fans have told me this. The reason why a lot of fans bring a lot of food into Meadow Park, I hope maybe from security is watching this, that they bring food into Meadow Park is because they saw Leah's mom basically bringing like a whole picnic, and they said, well, if Amanda can do it, then I can do it too. And so then lots of people started bringing lots more food
Did they?
into Meadow Park.
Wow. So she's responsible. Well,
She's
we actually have there's one person in our party, Julie, who comes to watch. She comes to more matches than I go to actually, and pretty much every time she brings rock cakes. She bakes rock cakes and she brings them, and I live for the moment when Julie produces the bag of rock cakes, then we can all have a little bit of a snack. They're lovely. They're so nice.
I don't know what rock cakes are.
Oh, it's a bit like a scone,
Right.
but it's not. It's like if a scone and a cake had a baby and it's got raisins in it.
Like an Eccles cake.
A bit like that, but more scone shaped. They're called Welsh rock cakes. They're really, really lovely. Julie's are particularly good.
Shout out to Julie and her
Shout
rock
out to
cakes.
Julie. My dad's obsessed with them. He gets so excited when we're going because he knows that Julie's going to bring the rock cakes. Sometimes he takes some home for like a snack later. He'll have one at the match and then like take a couple home to have afterwards.
But you know, people watching this are going to be like, right, we need to look out for Julie and we
Julie,
need
no
to
rock cake.
find the
I know.
rock cakes.
Please don't besiege her. Don't steal my rock cakes.
Oh dear, that's so funny. Okay. Okay, there was one thing actually that you said. It was like the last line in the book, chapter 30, which I thought was actually really beautiful.
Not a spoiler though.
What?
Not a spoiler though.
They would have read the book already.
I know, but what if they haven't?
Ay,
Can't give any spoilers away.
but it's literally the last line. Fine. Okay,
No, that might be fine though. And don't give anything away on the last line, will we? That'll be all right. I get so panicked about spoilers. I do.
crack me up, John. Right, I'm trying really hard now not to laugh. Oh no, once I get going with laughing, I don't stop. Okay, it says if the journey was long and hard, it makes reaching the goal sweeter.
Okay, that's not a spoiler, so it's okay.
I thought that this really that really spoke to me because I feel like as if that's basically my whole life. Honestly, it really is. Um, anything
Yeah, I
to
think
show with patience,
yeah.
persistence, you
Yeah,
know.
it's that grit, that determination. Like, if you've had to work hard for something, at the end, it's going to be so much nicer
Mm,
because you're going to just, despite the working hard for it, despite the obstacles that might have come up on the journey, you've overcome them to get to the end anyway.
mm.
You've come out on top, you've come out as the winner.
I always say, anything worth having never comes easy,
Absolutely.
which is
100% agree
which
with
is
that.
I wish certain things would come a bit more easier
Yeah.
though.
Yes, I do know what you mean.
So, lastly, I mean, I keep saying lastly, no, but honestly, this is lastly. What's next?
Well, I guess time will tell. Obviously, we'd love to write more books. We'll have to just see what happens there. Um, I would like to continue writing books. So obviously, I am having a baby fairly soon. But that's the wonderful thing, really, about about writing is it can be done from home in any spare snatched hour here and there. Even that can make a difference. So to answer your question, I for me, I'm just going to keep writing, whether that's the Wonder Team or whether it's something else. Time will tell. But yeah, that's the big thing on the agenda.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for coming on to the podcast once again.
My
As
absolute
always,
pleasure.
as always, we always just talk about
I
everything.
know, get carried away, don't we?
I'm starting to think that rather than needing a few hours, we might need like a day.
A day, I know, and then release it in like segments.
Yeah. Yeah, this one will definitely be in segments, I think.
I was thinking that actually. I was thinking, oh, we're gonna have to do like a part one and a part two, cut it in half so that it's not so long for everyone to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But honestly, thank you so much. And I'm really excited for the future and good luck with everything. And I can't wait to see the little one as well. So everybody get Jordan baby stuff, okay? Next
Oh
book
no, don't worry.
signing. Next book
We've
signing.
got
Don't bring
lots
your
of
shirts,
baby
bring
stuff.
baby stuff. Oh, actually, that
We've
was
got
a
loads.
question. That was a question that we had. Are you going to do book signing?
I would love to do book signings. It is very dependent on schedules. Obviously, my schedule is a lot easier to manage than Leah's. Leah is a very busy person. But we honestly, we love doing them and we love coming out. We love meeting everybody. So if we can, we absolutely will. But nothing is set in stone at the moment. So the best I can give you is we would love to, but watch this space.
Yeah, I suppose with the Euros and everything, Nations League, there are
Yeah,
so many competitions happening.
yeah,
You'll try your best to make it happen, but
absolutely.
we know what we know. Also, there was one other thing. This is a very nice comment from a fan that said, "I'd love to know Jordan's recommendations for other books similar to his series for families to read while patiently waiting for her new releases. All the little ones I've given the series to all just want more Wonder Team adventures. So I'd love to be able to recommend some more works to these budding bookworms that have similar vibes. Would love to know if there was any piece of literature that particularly inspired her in the creation of these stories too. Did you have a favorite read of 2024?"
Oh gosh, those are brilliant questions. Okay, so the first one, um, it's not football based, but it is an amazing kind of like whodunit series, which is the Adventures on Trains series by M.G. Leonard and Sam Sedgman. Fantastic. The premise is essentially that Harrison is, I think he's 12, but I might be wrong. And his uncle is a travel journalist who specializes in trains. And in the first book, he gets invited to go along on a historic train journey. It's the final, I think, the final journey of a quite famous steam train called the Highland Falcon. And while they're on board, a jewel theft takes place, and Harrison must try and solve the case. And I think there are maybe 6 books in the series currently, and there are plans to do more, if they can. That each book is dedicated to a different train journey, a written more often than not a real train journey that you could actually go and take yourself if you wanted to, and Hal is required to solve mysteries on each one, and they are just some of my favorite books. And actually, whenever I'm preparing to write a new Wonder Team, I really like to have a middle grade book on the go, just to get myself into the right headspace. And the Adventures on Trains books, they are books that I come back to and read again and again, just because they're so riveting, and the stories are so well constructed. So they're fantastic. I also really enjoyed. I think I was reading it actually the last time we spoke, Nirali. Greenwild by Parry Thompson is fantastic. It's that's more a fantastical world, where there's an alternate reality to ours that runs alongside our world that's accessed through Kew Gardens, and it's all about green magic and the environment and growing things, and that's a fantastic series as well. So those would be probably my top two recommendations. If you do enjoy the Adventures with Train series, Sam Sedgman also has another a series of kind of mystery books out. The first of which is called The Clockwork Conspiracy, which I enjoyed. And M.G. Leonard has also just released a new book called The Golden Scarab, which is another kind of time travel adventure to do with Egypt. So
You love Egypt.
yeah, it's a good one. So yeah, those are my go-tos. Um, my best read of 2024, that's a really, really difficult one. Um, I think so. Children's book wise, I would say Green Wild was my favorite. I really enjoyed that last year. Adult wise, I loved Babel by R.F. Kuang. That was an amazing read that really looks at the impact colonialism had on kind of like the education of the um, elite at Oxford in the sort of Victorian times, I think it was. But it's a fantasy Oxford. So the subjects they're studying are completely different to what they study now and in real life, and it's all a bit magicy, and that was brilliant. And then my final one, which is a non-fiction recommendation. Now this is really rare for me because as much as I know I should read it, I'm not a big non-fiction reader because I just love stories too much. But this book just happened to call to me when I was on holiday in the Lake District in September, and I absolutely devoured it. And it's called Why Women Grow by Alice Vincent, and it's essentially an exploration of what draws women to the garden. So if you've ever even tried to grow a house plant, I would really, really recommend it. I absolutely adored it, and I've given it as a present now to two of my friends for their birthdays because I thought it was brilliant. So yes, those are my recommendations. Those sorts of questions are always my favorites. I love giving book recommendations.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'm so bad at houseplants. My cactus died. I think I told you last time, didn't
Oh, I've
I?
killed a cactus.
I
I've
feel I'm
also
not the
killed a
only one.
cactus. No, you're not the only one. I have killed a cactus. It's a shameful moment in a grower's life when they manage to kill a plant that can literally survive in the desert. Um, yes, it comes to all of us.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad. And then the last question was, what's the best thing about being an author and being able to work with your cousin?
Um, best thing about being able to work with my cousin is I can tell her exactly what I think and I don't have to be professional about it. And vice versa. No, that's a joke. I mean, our family is. I don't think it's not news to anybody who's a fan of Leah's, but our family is so close that it's just really fun. Um, and we enjoy each other's company, and it means that when we're also doing the book promo, when we're doing the signings, when we're doing the press days and publicity and stuff like that, it just it makes it so much fun. I really look forward to those occasions. That's always brilliant. The best thing about being an author is that I just get to live in stories every day. Um, and I think that part of writing a book is also it's reading books. As an author, your craft is words, and you need to constantly be honing that. And the best way to do that is by reading books and exposing yourselves to different kinds of stories, different kinds of literature. And I love to read. So not only do I get to make up my own stories and live in these invented worlds that I've come up with, um, but I get to also read other authors as part of my job to kind of improve myself. And I get to do all of that with my family. I mean, that's pretty amazing. I'm very lucky.
Definitely living the dream. Living the
Yes,
dream.
absolutely. Definitely.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, thank you once again. for the time that you've taken. We've taken a lot of your time, and I
No, not at
and
all.
it's not true.
It's been a delight, honestly, I promise.
No, it has been awesome. Honestly, it has. I always absolutely love talking to you as well. The time always flies by when I'm talking to you. Even
Yeah.
when at half time when we were just chatting at Meadow Park.
Oh,
How
I know
did
it flew,
15 minutes
didn't
go
it?
so quickly? I don't
Yeah, it
understand.
absolutely flew by.
I didn't even realize that Leah was coming onto the pitch. And I was like, I didn't realize, wait, wait, wait. I was supposed to get pictures of this. I totally missed it.
I know, no, I know exactly what you mean.
No, but it's always honestly, it's always a joy, and I can't wait to see you next. And yeah, and I'm looking forward to the future, because I know there's loads and loads of exciting things that are going to be coming up as well. So 100%, 100%,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. But thank you so much, and thank you for answering everybody's questions as well, and giving us such a great insight into writing and the Wonder Team series. And I can't wait for what's coming next.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.